Welcome to theCUBE. My name is Lisa Maroney. I'm the Director of Business Development for the town of Chelmsford. And we've got another very interesting episode here today to answer some very important questions. First, I'll introduce my CUBE hosts, Jen and Karen. Welcome co-hosts there. Thank you for coming back week after week, joining me. I do have a very special guest here, which I've seen a lot of activity happening at Town Hall, and I thought, you know what, that would be a really interesting topic to come on our show. And welcome Carly Bari from the U.S. Census.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and I know that there's been a lot of training going on here at Town Hall, and pretty big collective group of people that are coming in for training. So I'll just hand it over to you and you can introduce to us a little bit about your involvement with the census and how it's going in Chelmsford.
Sure, yeah. So I work for our partnership team, which is our team that interacts with different organizations all over the country. So my leadership is out of New York. We have 6 regions for the census. And so in the state of Massachusetts, there's probably about 28 to 30 of us that do the same role as I do. And we each have a kind of defined geography that we work in. And so in that defined geography, we're making partnerships with city government, schools, different charitable organizations, YMCAs, and everything in between. So anyone who wants to talk to about the census with us, we will talk to them. And the goal is to find trusted voices in the community to help share the message about how important the census is and why people really need to fill it out. And so that's the work we've been doing for over a year now. And the census would have normally been kind of wrapping up around now, but because of COVID, we have had extended our timeline. So right now in Chelmsford, we have been training some of our enumerator staff, and those are census takers who will be visiting people door to door, and they're visiting homes where that person has not completed the census for that household yet. So anyone who has already completed their census, good job, great, we're really proud of you. So you don't need to worry about it. No one should be visiting your home, but anyone who has not yet completed the census, census takers will start going door to door in Middlesex County starting August 1st. So I don't know exactly where they deploy and when, but that's generally when they'll start, and then they will be continuing the efforts through October 31st. So October 31st is the end date for when people can respond to the census. The other thing that we have going on, which this plays in really well, is this is what we're calling Push Week. So we are trying to do one final push with media and all of our partners. We also have mobile questionnaire assistance centers all around, where we have census staff with iPads talking to people at food distribution sites, daycare pickup and drop off, COVID testing sites, and just asking people if they've responded to the census, if they need help completing their census form. And so we're really trying to get one final push before that door-to-door operation happens. So that's kind of where we're at now.
Carly, I have a question for you, kind of as a follow-up to what you were just talking about the census takers that are going around with the iPads and connecting with folks in the community. So I'm the community services coordinator for the town of Chelmsford, and I'm a social worker. So, I work with a lot of people that, might be at a lower likelihood to actually complete the census. And I'm curious if you could talk about, how it is that you encourage those people to complete the census, and then in particular, how do you address getting census information from folks who are homeless? Because we do have a small homeless population here in Chelmsford. I think some people are a little bit surprised by that. but we do, and I work very closely with a number of them. So how can we make sure that our homeless population is being counted as well?
Yeah, those are great questions. So, for those folks who are kind of what we call them as, typically as a hard to count community, and that can be people that live in complex housing situations. That can be people from immigrant groups who don't speak English very well. That can be actually young adults are hard to count because they're highly mobile, they're moving all the time. And then people with disabilities can be hard to count, things like that. And so we have tried to preempt a lot of that through working with those different organizations to really reach out to those organizations or to those hard to count communities. But there's still inevitably going to be people who have not yet responded. And part of it is a trust issue. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands confidentiality is of the utmost importance for the census. So we operate under a federal law called Title 13, and it is more stringent than any other privacy law. And that means that no one's individual census information can be shared with anyone else, including other government agencies, such as the FBI or ICE. So we really try to help people understand that. And then we also have an extensive language assistance program. So online and by phone, you can respond to the census in 12 non-English languages. And then our staff that will be going door to door, we try to hire people who have those language abilities. And we try to hire people from within their community so that they look and sound a lot like the people whose houses they'll be visiting. In addition to that, this mobile questionnaire assistance program that we have going on, and we will be doing that through most of September. We have several staff who speak different languages, and we can go to different, that's kind of why we have been going to places like food distribution sites, because those people, unfortunately, are typically the ones who are less likely to respond to the census. Whether it's because it's a language issue or it could just be because they are busy trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from, not filling out the census. And so we're very cognizant of those issues, and we try very hard to reach those communities as much as possible.
Right. Do you ever combine efforts with like community health workers or social workers or anything to try to hit some of those populations? Like, for instance, since I do have a relationship with some of our homeless population, is there a way that I can work with the census folks to make sure that population gets counted?
Yeah. So then the second part of your question was specifically about the homeless population. And we have a special operation just for those experiencing homelessness, and that's called our service-based enumeration. That was originally scheduled to happen April 30th to May 1st. It's now been rescheduled to September 22nd to the 24th. So we have worked with partners all over the country to identify soup kitchens, food pantries, homeless shelters, places that provide services to those experiencing homelessness. And we work with those different organizations to collect census information from their patrons. And then we also have worked with different organizations to identify outdoor locations where homeless people are often found. And we will do a 24-hour overnight count of those locations, similar to what HUD does on an annual basis. So we work with different towns to identify those areas. And then census takers will go and visit those areas. They may conduct an interview, but if someone is sleeping or doesn't want to be disturbed, they'll simply do a head count in those areas. And then finally, one way that you could help those folks directly is those experiencing homelessness can complete their census online. There is a place where they can either identify their outdoor location or their location where they commonly sleep. They can describe that instead of having a home address, or they could use, if a partner organization was willing to have them use their organization's address as their address, they can fill out the census that way as well.
Great. Thanks so much. Terrific information. And I have more questions, but I'm going to let my other co-host jump in so I don't monopolize the whole time.
Sure.
Just to add on to that, Carly, do you have a recommendation where the homeless community might be able to access computers to file online since libraries are not open yet?
Yeah, so that is one of the challenges. So if they were able to have access at a place where they might be receiving services of some kind, but because of COVID, that definitely has made it more challenging, because we were going to be relying heavily on public places like the library. So I think some libraries are starting to kind of open up, so that might be a location. But if we are also willing to work with some partners, and we can bring our iPads for that mobile questionnaire assistance program. We can try to set up a location where people could come and we could help them respond to the census using our iPads as well. And then there's the phone option too. Phone option is also available to folks, but I know that that's not always accessible either.
And are your staff that go out door to door to try and follow up with people that haven't filled it out, do they only operate during daylight hours? Is there a specific schedule? Because I know with us, we have caregivers that can work 12-hour days and not be there in their homes to answer these questions.
Yeah, right. So we do only visit homes during from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. For safety reasons, and because that's when most people are available. But we also will visit homes multiple times. So if we don't get an answer from that household, then the census taker will try a different day or a different time. So maybe they visited in the morning one day, they'll try to visit in the evening the next time. And they will make up to 7 attempts at a single household to try to collect census information. And they may also, even if they see a neighbor outside or something, say, is this home vacant, or does someone actually live there, so that they can kind of decide how much more effort they need to do to try to make contact with that person.
And so since I work with the elder community a lot, do you find, do you have expectations about how many responses you're going to get for the census sort of before you get the responses, to know, we've missed a lot of people or we haven't? And do you find that seniors are usually pretty good about putting in their information, or do you have a hard time tracking them down? And then one more question about that. What about seniors that live in an assisted living?
Yeah.
Is it management that fills out the census for the whole place, or do the individuals still get to fill out their own?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, we do, I think the Census Bureau does have some pretty scientific numbers about what their expectations are. I'm not privy to that information, but I think generally we kind of have, we have our hard to count communities, and we have areas in certain cities that we know are going to be challenging for different reasons. This year, I think typically the elder community is not typically a hard to count community, but because this is our first digital census where we were really encouraging most people to respond online, we did anticipate that the elder community would be more challenging, and that they might not be as familiar with the computer or might not find it as comfortable. And that's why we also offered the phone option as well. And I know my grandmother, who's 87, has never owned a computer in her entire life. She thinks it's like crazy science. She called and she was able to respond to her census that way. And she said they were really nice and friendly and all of those things. So yeah, we have worked with a lot of, the aging, Council on Agings in different communities to try to reach out to that community. And then for the second part of your question, so assisted living facilities, most of them fall under our group quarters operation. operation. So we have an operation that counts people who are living in facilities where they're receiving services and they're living with non-relatives typically. So this includes not only assisted living, but college campuses, prisons, rehab facilities, and the like. So assisted living facilities kind of can be a range of different things. But if people are living there most of the time and are receiving services, we work directly with the management of those facilities to collect the census information from them. So same with colleges and prisons and rehab facilities.
So thanks, Carly. I just wanted to give some information to our viewers that I just learned at the library is now letting people in to use the computer for 30 minutes. So if you haven't filled out your census yet and you want to do it online and you don't have access, the Chelmsford Public Library is a great place to visit. And maybe you get 30 minutes of air conditioning today.
Yeah, definitely.
Carly, we had the opportunity to watch a PSA that was put together by Chelmsford Telemedia, sort of highlighting the importance of folks filling out the census. And in the PSA, they, the students talk about, the fact that census information is used for, determining the number of legislators for an area. Maybe we could take a look at that PSA from Chelmsford Telemedia right now.
Mrs. Murphy said that our assignment is to come up with a sort of tagline for the census for 2020.
Yeah. I'm just going to look up some stuff.
Okay.
Hold on.
The data collected by Census determine the number of seats each state has in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Because it's like Census 2020, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Census 2020, you matter. Something like that. Or wait, no.
Census 2020 gives our state money.
But it's not just about money, it's about your rights, though.
No, true.
This could actually be really good. Stop. I need everyone to focus for a second. I know, I just need I need a minute. Okay, wait, hold on. 2020 census, come to your senses. What do you think?
Filling out the census is easy. Coming up with a tagline? Not so much.
I think we got it. Do we have to write it down? Or can we just say it?
Can you talk a little bit more about what the data from the census is used for?
Yeah, definitely. So census data is super important. I think it's more important than most people realize. And the number one thing it does is it determines the number of seats each state gets in the House of Representatives. So that's one of the big ways that it affects our representation. And then the other way that it really determines our day-to-day living is it determines the allocation of $675 billion annually. Then that is for social services and infrastructure. So infrastructure being our roads, our transportation systems, our schools, our libraries, all of those things. And then social services that are funded based on census data include things like SNAP, WIC, Section 8 housing vouchers, Title I grants, things like that, school lunch programs, and the list can go on and on and on. And so I think a lot of people don't realize how much census information affects our day-to-day life, and it really does affect everyone. And I always like to remind people, an undercount in the 2020 census is going to equal underrepresentation and underfunding for the next 10 years. So that's the other really important thing to keep in mind, is that this isn't just, we'll be underfunded for 1 year or something like that. No, we would be underfunded for the next 10 years. So it really has a big effect.
Right. So important to keep in mind, particularly in a town like Chelmsford, where we have roughly about 30% of our population is senior age, and so lots of social services for those folks that we'd want to make sure those folks are getting counted, and also the waiting lists for housing in Section 8 in this area are extremely long. So I think that's another reason why so important for people to fill out their census.
Yeah. Well, and luckily for you guys, I just looked up the data right before this. Chelmsford has 80.5% response rate, which is excellent. It's one of the highest in the whole state. So you guys have really been killing it. And so for perspective, the state average is 64.6%. And the national average is 62.6%. So, so Chelmsford has really been doing a great job with the census. And I know there's been a lot of people involved in the Complete Count Committee in Chelmsford, and there's been a lot of active folks who have helped make that happen. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, we do have a very active, involved community, and that's how I spotted my colleague as part of the census. And I said, you know, hey, what are you up to? So there's a lot of personal investment in Chelmsford and making connections throughout the community. And I just wanted to kind of contribute to the conversation that my connection with the census is more about using some of this data in the grant pursuits and the census tracts of the different areas and showing the needs or the demographics. And, you know, a lot of this data is very important besides just counting emergency response or state emergencies, things like that. And like I had said, some of this grant information, community development block grant, HUD stuff. And I, you know, as I listened to what you were saying, Carly, I'm thinking about how does it work with some of our major employers have thousands of people that live in all different places. So how would you be able to target a large employer that way to capture that many count? And I guess that would be a different type of approach, but you're trying to collect data by community. And so what are the ins and outs of how that might work?
Yeah, so the census is really based on where you live. So that's kind of the basis of the whole thing is we work on households. So we're sending the census to individual household addresses, and the census form is asking questions about everyone who lives in that household. So it is kind of hard to, when you're talking about a major employer and like how that affects their whole basis for their employees and things like that. But the other side of that is that the census is happening in every single community all across the country. And some of that, you know, like you said, some of these grants, a lot of these grants are based on census data. So, you know, some grants might be really focused on a specific census tract or a town or something like that. But then some of that money that's allocated in that $675 billion is to the state or to the county and things like that. And that might be capturing a lot more of, you know, that money allocation for bigger employers or business grants or things like that.
It's really important. I think most, you know, especially like you're saying the numbers in Chelmsford, people are learning, you know, the census is only every 10 years. A lot happens even in 6 months of time. So 10 years of data, I'd like to say maybe even 5 years out from that, you feel like, oh, this is old data. And hearing that you say it takes more than a year to prepare in the next data collection, is there a role, or what are you doing? Is this a full-time job for you, or are these just every 10 years you hire a crazy amount of people to go out and collect data? But I'm sure there's an awful lot of preparation as well as data manipulation and understanding what is out there for maybe new programs to come forward and adjust the needs by seeing what the data reveals.
Yeah. So this is a full-time job, but it's just a temporary job. So I've been working for the Census Bureau since April 2019, and I will probably be wrapping up in the next few months. And so most of us are temporary workers. So it is full-time, but it is temporary. Some people work for the Census Bureau on the ongoing survey side of things. So that's the other really interesting thing about the Census Bureau is they run 130 different surveys and programs, which is really pretty crazy. And I think a lot of people don't know that. So they have a lot of different economic surveys, government surveys. They have there's ongoing surveys on population that kind of boost up the census data and make it more relevant throughout the 10 years. So some people from that side of the census come over for the decennial census and get a different perspective. But it is really, really impressive how quickly and how many people they hire to ramp up and make this happen.
Yeah. Well, we're actually out of time. We have a lot more questions to ask. I could see my colleagues they got more questions to ask. So I'm wondering if you'd like to come back on maybe a little bit ahead in a few weeks or a couple of months, so you can give us some more feedback on how amazing Chelmsford has been in the census process. We'd love to stay involved.
Yeah, definitely. Let's keep in touch, and we'll see if we can't give you another update in a few weeks or months or something like that. And again, thanks again, and thanks to Chelmsford for providing so much help to the census and training space and encouraging your citizens to respond. It's been really helpful.
Good to know. Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Carly. And we look forward to having you back on again soon.
Great.
Thank you, Carly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Carly. We'll talk to you in Chelmsford at 100% response rate.
Yeah.